Okay, happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully, I am seen and heard. We are continuing on with our look at Dune. We have two great houses in conflict: House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and you, the Emperor, behind it. Well, not exactly, but we are into chapter 3 of the core rulebook. And what is it called officially? What Adventures? Oh, that's the wrong book. Here we go. Adventures in the Imperium. We're going to look at creating houses. No Bob Vila required. Control the coinage and the courts. Let the rabble have the rest. Thus the Padishah Emperor advises you, and he tells you, if you want profits, you must rule. There is truth in these words, but I ask myself, who are the rabble and who are the ruled? This is from Muad'Dib's Secret Message to the Landsraad from Arrakis Awakening by Princess Irulan. All right, I do like these quotes, and they're if in Dune, at least Dune, the original book, they had these quotes. I think on the chapters had quotes. It was an interesting approach, I think, in that the quotes themselves kind of spoil a little bit what's going to happen in a sense. Spoil, because if you're in the book wondering what's going to happen with Paul and Muad'Dib, and then you're getting quotes that clearly take place after or at the climax, but pretty much after. I think all the ones in the Dune book pretty much come after whatever's happened at the end of the book is going to happen. It just gives us a different tone to the book, but don't want to get sidetracked. But I always thought they were cool. Okay, I'm gonna have to zoom in here. So we're on, like I said in the last stream from what was that, Friday? As much as I like just kind of the backstory for the backstory's sake, because I am someone who's super interested in the setting, the parts of the setting I'm really looking forward to delving into are the ones that are mechanized, that kind of have things attached to them. And so I think we're getting into that, because I'm presuming we're going to be making houses that are either going to use as for players as houses that may be a part of or even run. And I'm assuming also this would be the similar procedure we would use to create houses to run as adversaries or just non-player entities, I guess. In Dune and Adventures in the Imperium, the player characters all serve a single noble house. So before we create those characters, it is vital to determine a few details about the style, agenda, and attributes of the house they serve. The house is obviously of great importance to the players, as it determines what types of characters they can each create and what they might aspire to. However, it's equally important to the game master, as it determines the general level of the campaign and what sort of adventures the players want to encounter. So the nature of the house should be a group decision between the players and game master, which all makes a ton of sense. There's going to be a lot, obviously, that seems like we're baking into the house. So we should all agree on what everyone wants to play, right? This is your sort of game specific, basically session zero kind of conversation. We're playing in the Imperium of Doom. It might be doomed, of Dune. And then let's decide what house everybody's a part of. And I think this is also nice, I guess, that everyone's going to be on the same page, because it's going to be everyone's house. Sorry, my chair's falling. Everyone's part of the same house, so we all have to start kind of on the same page. The first decision to make is the general level of power the house commands. It might be a low-ranking house, only just able to stand on its own feet, or an ancient and powerful combine controlling several planets. While it's tempting to take control of the latter, the more power you have, the more enemies you have acquired and will continue to acquire. The more renowned and dangerous your house is, the more deadly your opponents will be. You have been warned. I wonder if this is a little bit, now we haven't even gotten to if there's a leveling situation or what's happening with different power levels, but obviously this is one way to set the lever of that power levels, is how powerful your house is. If you're playing House Atreides or House of Harkonnen, let's say, then the stakes are very high. It's kind of a high level game. However, you could, instead of doing that, play a lower level house, in which case the stakes are much lower, much more localized. And I think they would both be fun. And I think it's easy to get kind of caught up and say, oh yeah, I want to be part of a Atreides or Harkonnen or whatever, but one of these big houses. But I think it's also fun, like in the kind of we see in OSR games often generally. There's a lot can be had with sort of things that are not of just worldwide scale, but they are small, they are local, but they're going to feel big to you. So don't necessarily jump at the big leagues because there's fun to be had in the minors, so to speak. It's probably even not even a good way to look at it, right? Because I think there's fun stories to be told at multiple different levels of what was the word I used before of stakes. And of course, life or death are always the highest stakes anyway, and that's not gonna change regardless of the house you pick. Before making any definite decisions, your group, players, and game master together should take a moment to discuss the story you all want to tell. Do you want to narrate the rise of a low ranking house or perhaps the fall of a great one? Will the house be a renowned haven of tranquility or a military dictatorship? Will religious fanatics rule the house? Or does it craft technology dangerously close to the Butlerian prescriptions? Once you have a few ideas, you should also consider what part your player characters are going to play. Will they be among the most important agents in a small house retinue or cogs in a mighty administration? The larger the house, the less important the player characters will be to its leaders, but the more power they will command when they take control. These are all really good questions. I mean, there's definitely a narrative feel here, but it also is a little bit like the setting within the setting. If you want to think about the setting as being the Imperium overall, and then these kind of almost, I don't want to say, maybe setting's not right, almost like you're setting the kind of campaign, right? The idea that you're part of an ancient house that's sliding into destruction is really interesting. That is what you're playing here. Almost like if you were going to play a game of I think of the computer games like Crusader Kings, and you can take you can pick as your kingdom, your starting location, a place that's on the rise, or a place that already is at a powerful spot, or you could take a place that's weakened for one reason or another, and all those things will determine your part of your game experience and part of the challenge of, okay, this, if we were not to do anything, this kingdom, or in this case this house, is just going to slide down until it's taken over, or it just slides into oblivion one way or another. And then the story of kind of the campaign is, can we right the ship? And then maybe even afterwards, what can we do with it? Can we bring it back to its glory? Can we bring a glory that it never had before? And those are sort of powerful, yeah, they're narratives, but we're not necessarily suggesting they're going to succeed or fail, but we're kind of setting the sort of that this is what we want to venture for. These are our goals, if you will. The goals and then the backdrop of those goals. The game master may already have a plan in mind for the campaign, so it's important that the players listen to those suggestions first, but there's no reason not to modify this if there is disagreement. Remember that everyone in the group should have a voice in creating the house at every level, as it will be the foundation upon which you build your campaign. There are 4 house types from which you should pick one for your house. Okay. Right? So we're all playing together. It's a game of everybody. So let's all come to agreement. No one person, no one voice should have a sway over another too much, right? Players want to play, GMs want to GM, and you're not going to get any of that without the others. So we have 4 types of houses. We have a nascent house. The house has only just acquired minor house status. They might have distinguished themselves in battle or at court, or perhaps developed a device or skill that might prove extremely valuable. At this point, the house is only a noble family with a small retinue and a little land granted to them by their patron house, House Major, who controls the planet they reside on. However, as new arrivals to the Imperial stage, they have no real enemies and little to lose. With time, they might rise to control their home planet and perhaps even beyond. This is an interesting one, right? New money. You're a new house. You've done something that's got enough notice, and you've been sort of brought up. You've been elevated to this status as a minor house, but you are a super, super small fry. And that will obviously pose problems because you don't really control your future. And yet it also solves a lot of problems because no one's looking at you yet. So that's basically nascent house, a newly elevated minor house. The next stage, which is also I guess an era of play or a type, is the house minor, which seems like going from the first one, a new house, is now one that's kind of established. So this house is an established house minor, one of the most important of the vassal houses that serve the same house major. The house has a strong tradition or dedication and service to their patron, but has not yet established itself far beyond their home planet. Their holdings will cover around a third of their world, or might be set upon a moon controlled by their house major. However, they must constantly jockey for power among the other minor houses that also serve their house major, rivals for its favor. All right, so right, we're upping the stakes a little bit. You start off as a new minor house, or you could pick starting off as an established minor house, one of the leading minor houses, but you're still a minor house, but you're better off. You're you're at the top end of the food chain of house minors for a particular major house. Then the next type, which would also be kind of the next stage, is house major. The house is the ruling power of an entire planet. Several minor houses serve its interests, and it is a serious contender in the politics of the Imperium. The house has several agents and soldiers at its command and is a leading force in at least one area of commerce. Unfortunately, this sort of power does not come without making enemies. Spies and assassins are everywhere, and there are many rival houses, great and minor, that covet the power and resources this house possesses. So you've graduated to a house major with all the resources, influence, power, and enemies that that come with that. And then the last one I'm thinking is a great house. Yep, last one. The house is one of the greatest powers in the universe. It controls not only a homeworld, but a few other moons and even planets besides, all managed by loyal minor houses. The resources at its command are legion. And let me just swing over here. Well, and its power is almost unassailable. Unfortunately, the forces lined against it are just as powerful. Not only are its resources coveted by its enemies, but they're also looking to destroy the house out of fear it might one day do the same to them. Perhaps even the emperor is worried that this house's ambition might even turn to the imperial throne itself. And we have an example. After some discussion, the group decides to play an established house minor, one looking to move out from under the shadow of the house major they serve. They pick the type house minor and name it House Mole. Mole. The game master receives one threat per player to begin the session. This is an interesting note because we don't know what that is yet, but it's like there's some box text that we're going to get into right now. The game master has a pool of points called threat. And then I think if we recall, we did see that in their example of play, but it was unexplained. The game master has a pool of points called threat they can use to create all manner of problems and difficulties for the player characters. And we'll see threat later on. How much threat the game master begins with each session of the game depends on what type of house the players have chosen or attained through the course of play. So if you're a new house minor, no starting threat. If you're a established house minor, one threat per player. If you're a major house, two threats per player. And if you're a great house, three threats per player. Presumably, they can turn those threats as into all kinds of stuff. And obviously, the more threat the GM has at their disposal, the better. But we don't know what the scale is. 3 a lot? Is it a little? I don't know. I would imagine it's 3 per player. So if you have 3 or 4 players, that's 9 to 12 threat. I'm guessing that's a good amount, but we don't know yet. Okay, so we have some domains. What are domains? I'm not going to read all of this, but let's see. What are domains generally? Having established the general level of your house, we can now turn to what it produces or what it is famous for. As most houses rely on mercantile power and chome shares for their fortune, each house has developed a specialty in an area of business or produce that is important to the Imperium. We call these areas of acumen domains. Your house may have several of these classes, either primary or secondary domains. And the primary domain is the area your house is most famous for. And then a secondary domain is one that your house is known for, but is not their main source of income. And then depending on what level you start at, you either get, if you're a new house, you just have one secondary domain. So you're not really known for anything, but there's something that you're obviously getting some money from. House minors have one primary and one secondary. House majors have one primary and 2 secondary. And then great houses have 2 primary and 3 secondary. Okay, so we have areas of expertise next. They are divided up into machinery, produce, expertise, workers, or understanding. And then I think within there, right? Is that right or wrong? Let's see. Various domains. Okay, I see. Maybe. Various domains listed below are grouped into areas of expertise for the sake of simplicity. Okay, they are further subdivided to help offer ideas for what precise domains might be found within the area of expertise. I see. So the areas of expertise are these machinery, produce, expertise, and workers. Yeah. Oh, and knowledge, I think, or understanding was there. I don't know what having an area of expertise called expertise. There it is. Okay. And then so we're getting the different domains, and then they'll have ideas for each one. So for example, under the artistic domain, if you were to pick and the area expertise of machinery, then that in that artistic domain, that might mean that the domain might be stage effects or scenery pieces, scenic art, lighting, and sound systems. If, for example, if we're understanding, it might be philosophy, literary criticism, or theatrical performance styles. That makes sense. So we have different categories. or yeah, different kind of domain types, I guess. What are they calling them? Areas of, I guess, the areas of expertise. Or I guess the machinery, produce, expertise, workers, and understanding, I guess, are sections within an area of expertise. And the area of expertise are the big titles. So artistic is an area of expertise. I'm not sure why they didn't call it artistry, but in any case, and then you have kind of the sections that sort of you could pick. So you wouldn't have all of those. You would just kind of pick one, if that makes sense. So the overall, the kind of things your domain might be doing might be artistic or artistry, espionage, farming, industrial, and then we have some more over here. Canly. Oh, yes. The art of Canly is still alive. The next step forward from espionage is assassination. To avoid chaos, the great houses agreed on a set of rules for assassination to prevent a slaughter. These forms of Canly are designed to limit both assassinations and the inevitable responses and are ruthlessly enforced by all the houses. As such, they are also a lucrative area of business. That's cool. Military, political, religion, science. All right, we'll get to their example in a minute. We have a sidebar here on people as resources. Okay, so it's basically trade in peoples, not necessarily slavery as such, but people as resources. Much like, oh, I've got a mentat. Oh, I've got a suk physician. Oh, I've got whomever, right? Okay, so here's an example. As a house miner, right? And they're continuing on with the house that they created earlier. As a house miner, House Malay has two domains, one primary and one secondary. For a primary domain, the player group decides to have an artistic area of expertise. They choose poetry, parenthetically produce. And so the kind of section is produce or produce, things that they produce. I don't think they mean vegetables. And that's poetry, making their homeworld a haven for the arts, where those accepted into their poetry groups are renowned for creating the most incredible verses in the universe. For their secondary domain, the group decides to branch out into assassination and picks assassins, parenthetically workers, from the Canly area of expertise. The group decides that many of their poetry schools are actually a front for training assassins who are also taught to kill with a certain poetic elegance. Well, so you see, they found a way to merge together poetry and assassinations. So the poetry is the one that they're most well known for, but they're also doing assassinations, right? Which was their major? Yeah, okay. I'm guessing the primary. Yeah, primary is the artistic and the secondary is the Canly. Okay, so then next up, so we've got our house. We've chosen what kind of house we're starting with. Really, what kind of the way you could look at it also is what era of its lifespan is it in. We have picked basically what this house produces into the Imperium. And I have to say, the structure of the Imperium and the way they're doing this, it makes it very easy. Something that you come up with when you're trying to figure out world building is kind of, if you even get to this level, and you don't have to, and I'm not saying that in sort of an ego kind of thing, or well, if you get as far as I do, it's just oftentimes you don't even really need it. But the idea of like, well, what is this? What are these people actually doing? What does this city actually produce? What is this town? What are they doing? The kind of the way that the setting sort of is everything feeds into Chome and everyone gets their tickets, but you just kind of have to put something out there. You don't It's really like it's obfuscating or abstracting away a lot of the and plus given that's kind of a sci-fi thing where we're not worried about trade routes or who's next to whom. It's like, no, you're just kind of just gonna all you have to do is kind of just announce sort of what you're working on and then how it sort of gets distributed into the Imperium. It's sort of taken care of for you by the Spacing Guild and Chome and all that stuff. So it's kind of nice. You can just kind of you don't have to get into it. I guess what I'm saying is it's got kind of the amount of depth that I would want mostly out of this, which is here's what we make. If this were an NPC or this was sort of a non-player house, and the party were to show up or hear rumors about it or ask the question, hey, what does House Mole do? I've got an easy answer that's a little bit fleshed out, but I don't really have to worry about it beyond that. It's just kind of there for me to use, and they can interact with it as they want. So I think I like the balance of I've got a little bit of specificity, I got a little thing that maybe makes this house unique from some other house, because they're probably not the only other house that does poetry, but they might be, probably are the only house that has matched up poetry with assassinations. The only thing that's missing, just as a point of interest, is they're not giving you tables to roll on. Maybe they'll be later in the book. Maybe they don't really want to give you that because this is kind of from a player standpoint, so they want you to go through the process of thinking it out and not just rolling. But I would probably create a quick table with a bunch of that stuff so I could roll. I could roll some things to get inspiration, at least for the other minor major houses that I'm not pulling directly from the book, which wouldn't be many anyway. All right. So now you've done that. Now you guess you get to create your homeworld or just decide what your homeworld looks like. So you can ask questions. What's the dominant form of weather? Is it hot, a little cold, always rainy? What sort of habitation is there? Is it mainly cities, towns, or isolated farms? What is the crime rate like? Is it peaceful or violent? How soft or hard is the house on crime? How content are the people? Do they respect the rules or do they labor in fear of them? How much of the house's wealth is put into the community? Do they keep it for themselves or are their holdings full of public works and support systems? So good questions. We haven't even seen if they have really much of a sense of commerce or I would just say before how I like the simplicity of just everything kind of feeds into Trump. We don't know if they get an income or if it's abstracted away as you kind of have. We're going to have sort of rolling against a target number if you want to buy something for your house. We don't know how that works yet. But these are good questions. I do think that probably, and this is probably true to the book, so I don't remember, there's not really, that the sort of, I'm guessing that the worlds are kind of Star Trek-y. If you ever remember, if you ever watched any of the different Star Trek shows, generally they'll go to a whole planet and there's pretty much one thing that they'll go to. There's going to be one city, one settlement, one something that is kind of characteristic of the entire planet. And even Dune, it's like, okay, Arrakis, desert planet. Caladan is basically ocean planet. I don't know, wherever the Harkonnens, I forget the name of the Harkonnens planet or Harkonnens. I think maybe it's just pollution, pollution planet or just a factory. No, that might be the X might be factory planet, right? They're all very one note. Not, Earth doesn't have a single type. It's got different types all over the place. But oftentimes I find with the sci-fi stuff, they tend to boil it down to that one thing. It's always funny where you have this whole planet and everything that's happening happens in one town and this one part of this planet. And that just that's the whole planet. But it does make it easy to get into because obviously you could spend a whole lot of time just working up one planet. In this case, we're just going to talk about, what, it's a jungle planet. And this is the kind of the thing. And that's it. So it's probably all for the best, but it is what I was reminded of. And I don't think it's just the game. Like I think that the book and the movies, they sort of have that same vibe to it. That I remember. If someone remembers differently or just has read the books more recently, and if they go into more detail, I'd love to hear it. Okay, so here's the example about from House Molay and their homeworld. House Molay controls a string of large islands on the home planet of their House Major. The islands have a variety of features that might inspire the poets who travel around them. The people are generally happy, but the islands are sparsely populated with fishing villages and only one main town where the noble of House Molay live. Hidden away on several islands are their secret assassin schools designed as more fishing villages. Okay, well, there you go. And we're also at a point where it seems like you can, not have to live in Coruscant, right? You can, I don't know, and it'd be interesting to think about, though it's beyond the scope of everything. Like, did they go through a big industrialization thing and then once I guess you moved into a post industrialization or such a high degree of specialization and shipping and things that you could have essentially a somewhat powerful house that doesn't have big cities or anything, that just has fishing villages and a town. It's a really intriguing sort of idea, actually. Okay, house traits. The final element of creating the house itself is to select its traits. And the traits are later on. They can be used as if they are traits of their own by any player character, but only as long as they are recognized as members of their house and their actions imply the reputation the house has within the Imperium. So you can use any traits of your house you can use, but only if you're not disguised. I'm guessing is what they're saying. Like you have to be to use your house traits. You have to be basically flying your house colors. If you're sneaking at the House of Atreides, you can't use the House of Atreides trait. It's something to do with however we want to describe it. Basically, it is tied to sort of singing loudly your allegiance or your proclaiming your house self, if you will. If a player spends one momentum, they may apply one of the house traits to their character for the remainder of the scene. They may do this as often as they wish to spend momentum for as many of the house traits as they like. Each house begins with a trait for any primary domains it has. This trait is the same as the area of expertise for that domain. Each house also begins with a descriptive trait for its reputation. This might be honorable, like the Atreides, or brutal, like the Harkonnen. This trait details the way the rest of the Imperium sees your house and expects its agents to behave. Other traits may be gained or lost by the house during play, usually after an important event that changes their reputation in the Imperium. All right, so you get kind of one trait for any primary domains, and that's the same as their area of expertise. And then there's the descriptive trait, which is kind of like how they see you from the outside. The example from House Molay. House Molay has a single primary domain. It's well-regarded poetry, so it has the trait artistic, right? That's the area of expertise that they picked, artistry. As the house hides its assassination training camps and is looking to create a new name for itself, the group decides the house has been plotting for some time, gaining the trait secretive as its reputation house trait. Okay, so it has the artistic trait, and this one you don't choose. I mean, you don't choose it now, right? You picked an area of expertise that becomes your trait, so you don't pick it separately, right? So they picked the artistic area of expertise before, so they get the artistic trait now. The second one you get to pick now, and they chose to pick secretive, which is kind of interesting. So they know that their house has been acts shifty, and apparently also other houses know that their house is a bit shifty. So they get secretive. While the player characters, okay, so we're on the next section, which is called roles. While the player characters are important agents of the house, many of them may intend to distinguish themselves and eventually take a more leading role. Within each house of the Landsrat are several positions that require exceptional talent and loyalty, but offer incredible power and responsibility within the house. While the ruler is the most renowned, they do not survive long without the assistance of such as a spy master or advisor. While it's not quite time for your player characters to ascend this high, one day they will, so each player should take a moment to decide who they serve directly in their house. While they may report directly to the ruler of the house, a spy would mainly serve the spy master, a bodyguard the sword master, and a courtier one of the many advisors. Each player should decide who they report to, and to a certain degree, perhaps even who they intend to one day replace. All right, so there's obviously a hierarchy with each house. And you're kind of, I don't know if this is, I mean, I have no idea if there's a class system or how that part's working yet, but clearly there's some idea of, you're kind of, if we're starting this whole thing and now we've been designing a house, which is obviously very broad. And now we're looking at each individual player and saying, okay, we're going to narrow the scope for you. You're interested in spy stuff, then you should kind of go that way. Oh, you're interested in, I don't know, some other thing, you should go that way. You're interested in the kind of combat and defense and whatever, then you should go that way, that sort of thing. And it seems like they're saying you could take on a role themselves. Like it probably depends on how you want to start the game, kind of low level, mid level, high level. And then we get some of these, what are they calling these? The roles. Okay, yes, we have the most common roles here. So we've got the ruler, obviously, a consort. Oh, and so the ruler, we get, so I'm not going to read through all the different texts. We get ruler, and then we get some rights and responsibilities of the ruler, consort, different advisors. Each advisor has a field of knowledge they expected to be an expert in. There's a chief physician, there's an envoy, there's an heir. That's interesting that that's its own role. There's a marshal, or rule of law. We've got also a scholar, spy master, sword master, treasurer, and war master. All right. So, and you could make your own or, pick different ones if you want, but those are just the common ones. That's good. On to enemies. Finally, we would be remiss not to mention that your house will have enemies. Even the most pleasant and honorable house has someone that hates them. Very true. This might be for some imagined slight or a belief they are not as they appear, but it might just as easily be because they are really unhonorable and decent and despised for that. One often sees their own failings in the face of one's enemy. Okay, so we get some enemies here. Number of enemies. A new house, nascent house, has none because I just haven't been around long enough to get them, but they will. Minor house has one. Major house has one major and one. Oh, sorry. So a minor house has one minor house enemy. A major house has one major house and one minor house that serves them enemies. And a great house has one great house or two major houses or one faction, such as the Bene Gesserit, Imperial Court, etc., and a host of minor houses who owe allegiance to one of these enemies. So basically, the bigger you are, the bigger your enemies are. The balance, the circle of life in the Imperium. And let me just take a drink of this is grape aged spindrift for the working man. Okay, so now we roll a d20 for each enemy. That determines how much that enemy hates them. Oh, all right, so the lowest level is dislike. The second lowest level is rival. Then up from that's loathing. And finally, we have Canly. They're going to wipe you out, right? So Harkonnens and Atreides are definitely in that Canly phase. I do like that. How much do they hate you? We have what's the box text on house threat? As an enemy house is never far away, the game master may spend 1 point of threat to make any enemy house appear in the adventure in some fashion, whether in person or merely as a rumor. Their appearance might be part of a plan against the player characters, or they may simply be putting into play a plot of their own. They may even just be taking advantage of a moment of weakness with the player character house. So here we have our first practical use of threat, and it costs only 1 threat to do this. Now, I don't know what this means exactly. We make the enemy house appear in the adventure, but I don't know if that's supposed to mean that suddenly their agents are trying to intercept you, or if it's more of are we setting a tone? I'm not sure what that is, but it only takes 1 to kind of at least bring them in some sense, assuming they weren't already there. So at least we've seen 1 use of threat. And now the reason for the hatred could be competition. Brian says, let's get dangerous. Oh, boy. It's a Monday. So the reason for why your enemy house hates you might be competition, might be a slight, might be a debt, might be an ancient feud, might be morality, might be servitude, might be family ties, might be theft, might be jealousy, or just no reason at all. They just hate you. Do not like you, green eggs and ham. I do not like you, Sam, I am. Yeah, the example. As a house minor, House Molay has only 1 enemy, which they decide to call House Arcuri. In determining the degree of hatred, the player rolls a 12, meaning the houses loathe each other. Next, they determine the reason for this hatred and roll a 9, indicating a difference in morality. As House Molay are both poets and assassins, the players decide their enemy house is quite religiously puritanical. After some deliberation, the players and game masters decide that House Arcuri has uncovered rumors about House Molay training assassins, and so believe them to be not only a force for artistic decadence, but corruption as well. Very nice. Very excellent. And then what do we have next? It's just an illustration. Looks like it. Looks like looking out over Arakeen, maybe. All right. We are blazing through, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, here we go. Chapter 4, Crunchy Frog, aka Creating Your Character. There are countless definitions and interpretations of a life well spent, and of the opposite. There are often widely divergent biographies of a particular person. The same individual can be either demon or saint, and even shades of both. From The Wisdom of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Yep, early start today, MacJack. Indeed. Okay, so we're finally getting into, I don't want to say finally, because I think the houses was a cool thing. And I like that they have you do that first. And don't create your house first, create your characters second. That way you could make sure that everybody's got it in balance. Because one would imagine that since everyone's working for the same house, and now we have a shared vision of the house, that will all create characters that may do different things, may have different approaches, everything else, but we're all have our sled, we're all pulling the same sled in the same direction. As opposed to if we all just went out and made wildly crazy different characters, and then we had to try to integrate them together into a house after the fact. Player characters. This chapter deals primarily with player characters, how to create and advance them. A player character is any character directly controlled by one of the players, rather than by the game master. Player characters are split into main characters and supporting characters. Okay, so what is the supporting character here? Supporting characters are player characters too, but they're less developed than main characters and are intended to be created quickly during the game as and when needed to fulfill a particular role needed by the group. These supporting characters represent other officials and agents of the house and its allies, as well as servants, vassals, and other subordinates, such as soldiers and spies. Supporting characters can be either notable or minor. A notable supporting character is likely to be a significant recurring character, and they will be capable specialists in their own right. or a minor supporting character are the ordinary rank and file subordinates and servants of the house, quick to create and disposable for brief scenes where their skills are necessary. Sounds a little bit like retainers and however you want to define what specialists or retainers and hirelings, however, whereas the retainers, the ones that have kind of class levels and are sort of attached to you and are sort of important and recurring, are those notables. Whereas the minors are your kind of red shirts, put it in Star Trek parlance, or the folks like the link boy or somebody, or the torchbearer who is just kind of got to be there one day, gone the next, and for one moment, one scene, whatever. And it doesn't really matter too much. Brian Smith says though they're like PC NPCs. Yeah, I mean, I really like hirelings. I think if you look at them like hirelings from an OSR perspective, I think you'll be in the right spot. Uh, right. I think that's pretty much exactly what they are. I do like that up front we're baking it into something that the players can kind of do. And it makes sense because depending on where your player character is starting as, they're going to have teams around them. It would be like if you started off as a fighter and you already had some kind of support group. So you might say, well, my squire, if I'm a fighter type, is a notable. They're going to be growing with me. They're going to be coming with me maybe their whole life. And my whole life of my character, this squire is going to be there eventually, becoming, say, a knight, a lesser knight under me. And then whatever, right? They're going to be being with me, growing with me. And then minor characters might be just folks you pick up in a village along the way. Or in the case of you're running a domain type of deal and it's like you want to send out the butler. The butler is not really important. They're not the head of the front of house or whatever you call it. They're just, all right, send that scullery maid off to do there. Scullery maid A, go. And then you can go do that. And then we're not really going to worry about scullery maid A after that moment, which she has to do something like that. Brian asks, is there any mechanic for transforming a DM NPC to the party? They had some NPCs that serve the party but still had to manage them, would rather give them to the party as a slot or something in any kind of system. That's a good question. I mean, I think you could just, Brian, so I would say that if you wanted to do that, we have in your OSR type system, usually by default, you're limiting the amount of sort of higher level retainers you can have to or I think it's even actually, no, it might be anything to your charisma. So you can use your charisma bonus or something like that to basically get your slots. And then you could give them direct control over ones within their slots, and then everything else could be under your control. That probably would be the way to do it. I don't know if anyone's totally baked that in, but I feel like that's an easy peasy way. So if you have a charisma bonus of +2, then you can have 2 folks under your control directly, and everybody else is under DM control. And why that might be important is because the people under the player's control directly probably won't scare. You just let them, right? They're gonna have it. You're not gonna make checks for them. They are sort of in the player's grasp. And if you wanted to mess with that and say, well, under certain conditions, whatever, you could. Whereas everything that's under your control, and they could have many more, then they are all subject to the kind of things that NPCs are kind of subject to. Let's see. Brian, you could do total charisma for the party, but that might be a big number for you. Whereas if you do something like either use their modifier or use some divisor, like, take your charisma, divide it by 3. So that if your charisma is 10, you end up with, rounding down, you end up with 3. If your charisma is 18, you get 6. And then just have that per player. But really, it's going to come down to what works for you and, what system you're using and how much you want to manage. I would probably use a smaller number for who they're controlling directly, and then maybe have a larger number out of some kind of larger number that is a pool of GM controlled ones, if I was going to do it. In this case, though, in terms of just to circle back to Dune, that we don't get a number yet of how many you can have, but it also seems like you're starting in some sort of authority. So you have folks from the house, just general house worker populace that you're going to be able to call on and order around. Non-player characters, we have major NPCs, notable NPCs, and minor NPCs. And then finally, who are you? You could be a scion of the house, which is you're basically kin to the rulers. You could be a mentat. You could be a Bene Gesserit. You could be a swordmaster, physician. Are there any others? A smuggler, a Fremen warrior. My brother comes with many Fremen warriors. Alia was such a great character in the in the Lynch movie. It's kind of weird But her with the Chris knife or her little, yeah. I think at one point where they show her in the battlefield, she's just sort of in this like weird. It's totally horrible, but like this kind of they don't want to show her. She's, I guess, presumably been killing people because I think that's what in the book, at least. I think that's what the some of the women are out doing is they're just basically slicing, making sure that the Sardukar and are dead, and she's just sort of. And there's one moment in the book, and the Toto kind of electronic, the guitar music is in the background. She's kind of waving her knife. Good stuff. That's unborn Alia. I can understand why they did it, but man, give me little girl Alia with the blue eyes, saying weird things in a raspy voice. Wait for my brother, Baron. Definitely, hey Terrence, definitely a creepy devil child. Okay, so we got two methods for creating a character. You can either plan it or you can create in play. So I'm guessing planned is what it sounds like on the tin. Create and play is like planned creation, but you make fewer decisions. You make only a few key choices, such as an archetype, a couple of your skills, one of your drives, and one drive statement, and leave the rest blank on your character sheet. The rest of the details will be defined once play has begun. At particular points during the game, you may choose to define one of those elements, choosing a skill rating, drive statement, a focus, or talent to add to your character. Well, we don't know what any of those mean yet, but I like that. I think that's a nice thing. It's a nice way because one of the things, if we look at, I obviously I play a lot of OSR stuff, right? It's kind of my main jam. But when you look at OSR versus say 5th edition, one of the issues that people have with the 5th edition is that you have very involved character generation, which then implies a lot of attachment to those characters. So it makes it difficult for folks all around to embrace a certain amount of deadliness or stakes because you just, if you, and I get it, if you've spent an hour creating your character, you don't want to die within an hour of playing. That's just not a good use of your time. You don't want to spend an hour doing something and then it's over in 5 minutes. And then you got to spend another hour doing it. That just, if it takes, right, whatever that time you want it to be, kind of, you want to hope. Now, there are terrible decisions and whatnot, but just in general, putting aside the fact that you're giving your characters death wishes or just running them into cliffs or in traps. The idea is you want your investment time to pay off. You want to, and with OSR, right? The idea is you're putting in a little tiny amount of your effort and energy into character creation. So then, if you're only putting 5 minutes in and your character only goes a half an hour, you've still basically gotten back, 6 or whatever, 5, 6 times the time you put in out. And that math sort of feels a lot better. And also having not gone through, because it's not so in depth, you haven't gone through so much, that investment, like you haven't built up that investment level. It's only when you get a couple levels in there, you kind of really feel fully invested in the character. With this, what I like is that you're kind of getting a little bit of that sort of best of both worlds. And then the other thing is it avoids some of the pitfalls, presumably, I'm guessing, that you get in something like, well, really any of the games that go big into lots of character meta currency, skills, all that stuff. Because what could happen in a game like D&D 3 3rd edition or 3.5 is that you go down these rabbit holes of stuff and then you don't realize till after you've done it, maybe in a few sessions in, that what you built is not what you want, or what you built doesn't do what you thought it was going to do. And then sure, you can be undone, of course, but then and now it's a part of, well, I got to talk to my GM, and then maybe the GM's a stickler, and do I need to start a whole character and all this stuff, right? It can be a pain. This case, it's like, okay, I'm only going to fill out a few things. And then when I start to understand what I want my character to do, what I think they're good at, kind of I'm starting to get an angle on it, then I can set. It's a little bit like, I guess, in Blades in the Dark, where you sort of get down the line and then you can flash back to, oh, yeah, I put the hook in my pocket because this and the other. And you're actually in the moment when you get to the wall and you're like, I got the rope. Oh, and I got a hook in my pocket. Did I write in my inventory hook? No. What I did was I used some resource to make a callback saying, yes, I put the hook in my pocket earlier on because I knew I'd want to climb some walls. Kind of the same thing. I'm not picking some of these character aspects. I'm going to pick them now. It also means that you could sort of have a deeper, maybe more complex character in terms of their overall design, but you're not filling it out all at once. So you're spacing it out. So maybe if I was going to fill everything out doing the planned creation, it might take me an hour. I'm just going to do 10 minutes. And then later on, I'll do the rest. And if I only get that 10 minutes and then that character dies after 2 hours, well, I didn't spend an hour. It's you're you're sort of parsing out that character creation time over a little bit. So I think it just keeps it's a different way of dealing with expectations and that investment. And I like it. I kind of I've been vibing lately on systems that do something like that, especially if they're going to have in-depth character creation systems. Okay, so here we're getting into the nitty-gritty of character stuff. So let's see. Player characters in Dune Adventures of the Imperium are cut above most people. They are those who are the most definitively human, those whose discernment and judgment overrule base instinct. In short, they are those most fit to hold the positions of status and to shape the existences of others with their deeds. Okay, so we have personal traits, skills. So we have battle, right? Communicate, and this is communicate describes the character's ability to skillfully engage in conversation. We have discipline, the character's ability to influence and control their own mind and body. Well, we got a lot of little things down here. We have move, that's their mobility, and we have their understanding, or they call understand, their ability to take in and process information and to recall and apply that knowledge effectively at a later point. So I think this is why they used understand in that example of play. In the example play we read, one of the characters was playing a doctor, or maybe there was a Suk doctor, I think, and they were had to save an NPC who had been shot with a poison dart, and they had to use understand to figure out how to apply an antidote effectively for that whatever particular poison. So it makes sense, right? So you're attempting to discern details about the situation, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, I notice the skin's welling up and whatever it's turning green and veins or something come. Oh, I recognize that poison, and I'm able to apply that knowledge to then go into my little first aid kit and find the thing that I need that's going to neutralize that poison, and then stick it in the right place. We get ratings starting off with 4. That's interesting. Oh, no. So 4 is just a lack. All right. So 4 is your base, which means you don't know anything. You lack training or knowledge. 5 is you're trained at a basic level. 6, you're well trained. 7, you're highly capable and experienced. And 8, you're a master. So that's very interesting. 4 to 8. I guess, well, I don't know if we even know yet. I don't think we've even seen what kind of the dice and stuff we're using. So that's intriguing, but I don't know what it means yet. Or no, I think we saw an example play. I just don't recall now what dice they used. A character's focus. Oh, wait, sorry. So focuses. So we had skills. Now focuses. A character's skills are broad, and each character has a selection of focuses which allow you to demonstrate their abilities and the kinds of advanced expertise that comes with specialized training or hard-won experience. Focuses increase a character's chances of scoring critical success on tests using that skill in circumstances where that focus applies. There's no singular fixed list of focuses. Focuses can be chosen freely during character creation, but there are innumerable areas of expertise and specializations. In play, when you receive focuses for particular skills, they may be used on any skill test where they might reasonably be appropriate. The skill of focus is listed alongside is simply the skill most likely to use that focus. Where a focus requires you to specify something in particular, all marked with an asterisk, you may only apply your focus to that particular choice, but you may take the focus multiple times to have a collection of different specialties, such as picking music twice to play 2 instruments. All right, so let's just look at one. So these are just examples. They're not meant to be definitive. They're just meant to give us ideas. Jack says that skill rating makes me think it's a roll under system. Yeah, they did it in the example play. Let me see if I can find it. And here's the nice thing about having the written book here is I can actually flip back. Let me see if I can find example. Here we go. Okay, so I'm just going to read this again. This is Helen's the GM. Helen knows that there was a deadly poison on the dart that hit Nasir. She decides that for Taryn, that's the player playing the surgeon, to neutralize it, he needs to beat a difficulty of 4 on an understand skill test. Taryn decides that his faith belief applies, and he luckily brought some of his medical equipment, a useful asset. His Suk Doctor trait also gives him a bonus. It's still going to be a tough test to succeed at, though. So, okay, so they actually, you know what's funny? They don't say the dice, I don't think. They just say dice pool and roll. So I don't know if so maybe those are dice pool you get for your rating. I'm not sure because they use some momentum. So actually, I don't know which dice they use. So I don't know if it's we don't know yet, but well, we know that it's got target numbers. So difficulty of 4, but is it on a D6? Is it on a D8? We don't know. Don't know. Is it on a D4? Don't know. All right, so now some example. Let's look at one interesting. Let's see. 8 dice is a lot of dice. Sure. But it's, having played Mech Jack, having played in kind of an OD&D where we sometimes are dropping a load of dice, it's not bad at all, especially if you're just looking for particular outcomes like 6s. Like you're not adding them all up. You're not, it's one thing if you're rolling a fireball every round, you have to roll 8 dice and sum them. But if it is just looking for a particular face on the die, or maybe 2 faces if you get a bonus, it's like, oh, the target's 6, but I've got a +1, so I get 5 or 6. It's very easy to filter out. This takes us a couple seconds to go, all right, this many successes. And it is also fun to roll piles of dice, it must be said. So here's an interesting one. So for move, here are the kind of focuses you can have: acrobatics, tumbling and swinging, body control, climbing, dancing, distance running, driving, escaping, grace, moving with poise and style, piloting, that's one of the asterisk ones, stealth, swift, so moving quickly, swimming, unobtrusive, kind of sneaky, and worm rider. Interesting. So those are just examples, and I think the idea is that you could come up with your own. I'm curious to how many people when they're playing the games just pick from these lists. I bet you a fair number. But really, I think the idea is that you will come up with your own. Come up with your own that kind of makes sense. But they should be, obviously they have to be at least somewhat, I was going to say focused, somewhat specialized. Terrence says that's the game you're looking for. Every check is like rolling fireball damage. Well, I'm still I put together, Terrence, I put together my dice pool system, and I'm kind of building the RPG part around the system. Well, I have it. It's that do anything D6, which is just for right now. The version is just for using it for doing kind of skill based stuff in your ye old OSR game. But I am kind of building the RPG part around it, and you're not summing the dice, but it is basically throw big piles of D6s and look for 6s. But you're not summing them like Fireball. But I want to say something like the Fantasy Trip, or no, is it the Fantasy Trip or Tunnels and Trolls? I think it's very much on the rolling a bunch of dice and summing them. So Terrence, you should look at Tunnels and Trolls, even if just for inspiration. All right, so now we're getting on to drives. Character's inner life motivates and defines their actions. A character's drives thus shape the things they do and how successful they are at those things. A character is more likely to succeed when they believe strongly in something and less likely when they are indifferent. But those strong drives can also lead a character into trouble or lead them to take ill-advised actions. Each character has a rating in each of 5 drives, which are described below. Drives are added to a character's skills to derive the target number when they attempt a test. But they also define why a character is taking action and what drives them to succeed. The character's most important drive is rated 8, the second most is 7, and the rest at 6, 5, and 4. Which drive applies to a test is usually defined by which drive statement applies to the action. But sometimes players may wish to speed up play by directly selecting the right drive and looking to see if a statement applies. Brian asks if fudge dice are rolled in a pool. Counting up wins and losses in those gets you rolling big bunches, I think. I read fudge, but it's been ages, so I couldn't tell you. So I will believe you, Brian, if you believe it to be true. Okay, so we have drives. Everybody gets these drives, and these drives are duty, faith, justice, power, and truth. And each one of them gets a number. You rate them as you will: 8, 7, 6, 5, and 4. 4 means you care very little. 5, you know it matters, but you have other priorities. 6 is this is an influence. 7, this is a high priority. And then 8, it is the single most important thing for you. Let's look at an example. So, duty. Duty is the pressure upon a character to find their place in society and fulfill their allotted role, but also the weight of obligations and personal responsibilities. Use duty when it is your character's responsibility to get the job done and when others are counting on the characters to succeed. This might be in service to their house or the people under their command. Okay. And then we get the statement. So that's the drive. Bruce, you're going to have to wait. Bruce is trying to get out, but I can't let him out yet. You got to wait, Bruce. Sorry. All right, so now we have the statements. So that's the drive, and now we get drive statements. For each drive with a rating of 6 or higher, you define a single statement. This is a short sentence explaining what the character feels about that drive. Characters don't have drive statements for the lower rated drives because they don't feel strong enough about those things. And then we have some examples. We just read duty, so let's read some duty examples. People are the true strength of a great house. I serve at the pleasure of the house. Humans live best when each has their place. Acceptance of place is the death of freedom. Those above offer duty to those below. I know my responsibilities. Duty is a sharp blade, and what must be done must be done. So they're all very, very dramatic and strong. So you would, if you were doing something and you needed to you want to call upon duty, you would have your duty statement and you would look at it and say, hey, is the thing I'm trying to do, does that jive with this, with my duty statement? If it does, then I can apply duty to it. And if I do, you add it to the character skills to derive the target number. So if I had an 8 and my target number was 4, that would be 12. I don't know. We still got to see what the target numbers work. In any case, there are your drives, which I guess are kind of like your attributes. But I like it. They have the attributes in D&D, right? They have a physiological meaning, but no character-driven meaning. These are kind of nice. I like it. I don't know if I'd like to have these instead of or in addition to. Like something like Pendragon has a whole bunch of those in addition to the physiological pieces. It seems like for this game, maybe the physiological pieces, everyone's kind of on even ground. You're sort of all optimized physical humans, which kind of takes some of that out. Other than, I guess, we did go over the what do you call it? The traits, which I guess will establish some bits, some pseudo physiological bits. Let's see, ambition. The ability to form goals beyond the immediate visceral needs of life is a powerful part of human nature, and those who harness this ability to aspire, who can suppress their short-term desires in service to greater achievements, are those who prosper in a ruthless universe. And then, for example, duty ambitions are about service to a cause or group, discovering or understanding one's place in the universe, or freedom from strictures and responsibilities that constrain you. All right. Well, we're just about the hour, so I think what I'm going to do is going to pretty much call it here. I don't think I'm going to go through. Well, I guess we need to go through planned character creation because I think the elements are going to be there. We'll want to go through them, but I will save that for the next one. So yeah, we're getting there. What page are we on now? And we're on page 108. So we're getting there. We're getting there. I think it's definitely not that I've been going at a breakneck pace, but it's going to slow down. So I think we're going to get more into things that we're going to read carefully. I really like the drives stuff, I think, is my takeaway from this part of the book. I like it in Pendragon. I like it here. I like things that give you a mechanism, but also give you character building stuff. You're building somebody who has duty as a strong drive. You're saying things about their character, which will affect your what your character does, how your character does it, and really what they're rewarded for doing, what it make easier. Obviously, the more things that you're doing that match your duty statement, the better you're going to be because you can keep applying your duty to them. If you're going against your duty all the time, something like Pendragon would have you roll against it. We don't know yet what this will do, but just in terms of saying, well, duty is my strongest drive, but I'm not doing things that match up with that duty, my drive statement for duty. Therefore, I'm just not as good at it. Therefore, if I keep doing this stuff, I'm not as good. Even that is an interesting play. It's not preventing you from doing something, but it's making it very suboptimal. So you're not going to want to do that unless you really, really have to, which I think is intriguing, and I like that. And it's like you're not strangling somebody kind of playing the character they want to be, right? It's not me as a GM saying like, oh, you're going against your duty. Remember, duty's your strongest. But by mechanizing it, you've created a carrot for players to play to the things that they chose to, right? We're not randomly doing this. You're choosing to be someone who does duty. So assuming that that's what you want to do, you've chosen it. And the game is just sort of, by virtue of the way it's mechanized, is just kind of making it so you're going to want to pick the things you want to be and then play to your strengths. And I can dig it. I can dig it. Anywho, that's all for today. Hope you guys are still enjoying this. As you know, let me know how you guys enjoy these things, how you guys want them. One of the things I'm always looking for is how to do these a little bit better, more efficiently. You know, I've over the time I've been doing these, I've sort of changed my style a bit from doing one way or another. It's just a fact of life that as I go through these books, the first streams are by far more popular than later streams, just as people's interest dies down or just they take a while. So if there's a way I can make it better so that more people are engaged and just reaches more people and just more people are getting what they want out of these. I don't really want to read them beforehand just because I really like approaching them with open sort of everything and not being prejudged. But if that's really what people want, then I would think about how to do it differently. Hey, Avagamist, you did get here on the tail end, but yeah, go back and watch it through and then catch up. It'll be here for you. So yeah, let me know how folks are processing these. If there are reasons you fall off or get back on, or do you just end up watching them way later? You know how it works. Is there a way I could do these better? Would you like to see more just kind of highlights that are maybe less improv-y and just less kind of reading in the moment? Maybe I could do something with that. But I'm definitely curious how folks use these, and we just want to be as efficient as possible. But I do enjoy doing it this way. But you know, I do notice also that folks just seem to fall away from these the longer they are, and you get these big books, and it's going to take a lot of streams. So I don't want to be, if nobody's interested in part 22 of Dune Adventures of the Imperium, then I could be spending time doing something else. So let me know. But I'm really digging it, and we'll get into character creation next time. Other than that, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye now.